You flatter me, Count. Your reputation precedes you as well. There was no hostility in his tone, but it was there in his words. The Count ignored it. He smiled in reply, exposing still further the razor-sharp canines which made my blood run cold just to look at them. "The night is cold, and I am not as young as I once was," he said. "May I come in?" "Please, do."
Hello, my name is Daniel. Welcome back to the channel. We are in the middle of October, and that means we are in the middle of a reading event called Occult Detective October. This is an event that was created by MJ at the channel Reading This Life, where we're reading various occult detective stories or things like close to the genre. I have mainly been following along with other people's videos pretty enthusiastically, but haven't put out anything mainly because I don't have a whole lot that I think fits in the occult detective genre. But the other day I was watching a video by Frodo who mentioned this book, and he said, it looked really interesting, and I agreed. And then I saw it at the used bookstore like 2 days later, and I figured you can't really fight against the universe. So I picked up a copy of Sherlock Holmes versus Dracula by Lauren Esselman, or, by John Watson, of course. Uh, you don't really see Sherlock Holmes use the occult in his detective work, nor often do you see him going against the supernatural, at least in the canonical Sherlock Holmes. You have to go to the pastiche for that. So I wanted to check it out and see how fun it would be, and I was not disappointed. This is, it reads like Sherlock Holmes, but at a slightly elevated reading level. And the author has a really cute way of just explaining that in that he claims to have gone to an estate sale by one of Sherlock Holmes's last living relatives, and he couldn't afford anything. So rather than leaving empty-handed, he just did a quick bid on a box of junk, and when he got home, he found this manuscript. This is not a series of short stories like the classic Sherlock Holmes stories. It is one long narrative. And one thing I really like about it is that it slots directly into the events of Dracula without replacing the canonical events. It's just sort of described that Bram Stoker left out Sherlock Holmes's involvement with the whole Dracula thing. Sherlock Holmes' involvement begins when he is summoned by the harbor master to investigate this empty schooner that has pulled into Whitby Harbor. There are no sign of any crew and no drops of blood on the deck. However, the only body that is found is the captain, who is tied to the wheel and has a look of horror on his face and two puncture wounds. Also, there's a report of a giant dog that just leapt up onto the shore and ran off. And so Sherlock Holmes begins his investigation. However, due to some circumstances that take place in the book, he is forced to abandon the mystery, and he's really upset about that. And then some months later, and a few adventures later, he is reintroduced to the case of the Blue Fur Lady, this mysterious woman who has been abducting children and leaving similar puncture wounds on their neck. And if you know the story of Dracula, you know exactly who this is. Along the way, he meets up with the classic characters, including a Van Helsing, and he has a little bit of a rivalry between himself and Van Helsing. And Van Helsing is basically goes, "I don't want your help. I got this." So it's an interesting take on the story, and it's a nice little way of filling in the gaps of what happened behind the scenes with Dracula when he wasn't immediately present in the classic novel. I like this. I gave it 4 stars. It's fun. It's a really quick read. Again, the reading level isn't quite as intense as the originals, but don't let that deter you. It is worthwhile to check out. And apparently, this is part of a line of books where the same author wrote another one about Sherlock Holmes going against Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And then there's other people who wrote in this series where he goes against other supernatural threats. So, it's mayhap be worth checking out. Uh, After this, I'm going to read another Sherlock Holmes versus the Supernatural book. That is Shadows Over Baker Street, which is like a collection of various authors doing an interpretation of Sherlock Holmes versus the Cthulhu mythos. And I think that'll be really interesting. But this is a fun read. I suggest you check it out. And that's all I have to say. Thanks. Have a good one.